Good morning. Thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege to be in your presence. You know, as I got to Reykjavík and felt the chill, the frost in my bones, I couldn't help but imagine that momentous morning in October 1975. Across Iceland, offices fell silent, schools closed, shops shuttered. The very air seemed to stand still because 90% of the nation's women put down their work. They called it Women's Day Off, but it was really a day on. On for equality, on for dignity, on for the simple truth that societies collapse when women's labor and leadership stop. The following year, Iceland passed a sweeping equal rights law. And just 4 years later, it elected Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, who I know we're sitting in a building named in her honor, as the world's first woman to be democratically elected head of state, as we already heard. That legacy lives here still, not as nostalgia, but as muscle memory. Iceland consistently ranks among the world's top Western democracies, with women holding high-level cabinet positions across various sectors. Unlike in many countries where women are often confined to social and cultural portfolios, Icelandic women have long led in fields spanning the economy, industry, and beyond. This reflects the nation's enduring commitment to gender equality in political decision-making. Today, Iceland remains a lighthouse, from equal pay certification requirements for employers to the example of women leading at the very top, including President Halla Tómasdóttir, Iceland's second woman president. I'm sorry if I butchered the name, I tried my best. My country of birth, Iran, has its own phrase for that same lighthouse instinct. Zan, zindagi, azadi, woman, life, freedom. Born of Kurdish women's struggle and carried by millions of Iranians, it tells a universal story. When women rise, nations rise. Yet while Iceland has ranked number 1 in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index for 15 consecutive years, Iran has languished in the bottom 10%. This stark contrast reveals why the slogan, woman, life, freedom, is such a profound threat to the Islamic Republic. It exposes a system built on denying women's rights. It is the antidote to the regime's poisons: misogyny, murder, repression. This is our through line today. It runs from Reykjavík in 1975 to Tehran in 2022 and beyond. It says, collective courage moves history. And it demands that free societies match the bravery of those risking everything for freedom. Iceland hasn't only led at home, it has shown up for Iranian women abroad. In November 2022, as the world reeled from the killing of Jina Mahsa Amini and the uprising that followed, Iceland was the engine in calling for an urgent session, special session at the UN Human Rights Council. That session established the international fact-finding mission, the FFMI, on Iran, to investigate violations, especially against women and children. Iceland then helped ensure that accountability didn't fade with the news cycle. In April 2024, the Human Rights Council renewed the FFMI mandate, with Iceland listed among the main sponsors of the resolution so that evidence collection and reporting could continue. In 2025, the Council went further, expanding and extending the mandate again. That steady procedural work saves lives and preserves truth. Yet this vital work now faces a budget crisis. The UN Human Rights Pillar receives only 1% of total UN funding. And cost cutting has already left the FFMI with barely half its staff. Iceland's leadership is even more crucial in keeping it alive. Iceland has also leaned into the next frontier of international law, recognizing and codifying gender apartheid as a crime against humanity. In UN legal debates on a new Crimes Against Humanity treaty, Iceland explicitly welcomed discussions of applying the crime of apartheid to gender-based regimes, such as the Islamic Republic in Iran and the Taliban in Afghanistan, helping turn a moral intuition into a legal instrument. This matters because what Iranian women face today is not a series of isolated abuses. It's a system of oppression. And it's not just about hijab. Iranian women are among the few in the world who have fewer rights than their grandmothers did. Yet it is these same women who have risen fearlessly to ignite the movement the regime cannot extinguish. One of Ayatollah Khomeini's first acts after seizing power in 1979 was not only to impose compulsory hijab, but also to roll back hard-won women's rights in marriage, in child custody, in divorce. He lowered the legal age of marriage from 18 to 9, a provision still used today. Women were forbidden from singing solo in public, dancing in public. They were banned from certain professions, including becoming judges and president, laid off from government offices, and their lives and court testimony devalued to half that of men's. Of course, some women were called back to work because many of the new ruling elite had not finished high school and certainly didn't know how to type, which is why the state's response to woman life freedom was to pass a new compulsory veiling law, piling draconian punishments onto women and girls who resist the veil, and anyone who expresses solidarity with them. Even as Iran's economy teeters in freefall, the Islamic Republic spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year sustaining its hijab enforcement apparatus. Though women have made its enforcement publicly costly, the new law remains on the books. Women still face fines, harassment, and even flogging. And businesses are shuttered for serving unveiled women. UN experts and rights groups have urged its repeal, warning of an escalation in policing bodies and lives. The only reason it is enforced unevenly, and you see images in Tehran and Shiraz and Rasht and major Iranian cities of tens of thousands of women unveiled. It pretty much looks like a Western city these days, is because the world is watching. These laws exist, these repressive laws exist, but the world is watching. If that stops, Iranian women will be left to stand alone. At the same time, a new espionage law criminalizes dissent and expands the death penalty. The state has unleashed a breathtaking wave of executions. More than 970 people were killed in 2024 alone, accounting for 64% of global executions. And as of today, October 10th, at least 1,172 people have been executed so far in 2025, the highest rate in 3 decades. Many for offenses that do not meet the most serious crimes standard under international law, many for no crime at all, without due process, without fair trials. There are children in Baluchistan sentenced to death for participating in the weekly protests in the fall of 2022. This is not justice. This is a policy of terror. These facts are not abstract. They are the missing chairs at family tables. They are daughters denied education, grieving parents dragged to prison, journalists silenced, families shattered, communities broken. But to truly grasp the devastation, let us bear witness to the voices of Shaheen, Abdul Qaderi, Yalda, Dehqani, and Hasti Hussein Panahi, 3 courageous survivors of the Islamic Republic's atrocities.
سلام، من شاهین عبدالقادری هستم. یکی از آسیب‌دیده‌های جنبش ژینا. یک شب که در زمان خیزش ما بیرون رفته بودیم به سمت ما تیراندازی شد. الان 300 ساچمه توی طرف راست صورت منه. 50 روز بعد جمهوری اسلامی شوهر منو دزدید. به این هم راضی نشدن، پسرم را گرفتن، شکنجه کردن به خاطر اطلاع رسانی درباره سرنوشت پدرش. الان در وضعیت بدی به سر میبرم و نیاز فوری به درمان دارم. اینها گوشه ای از جنایت‌های جمهوری اسلامی هستند و من شاهد زنده آن هستم.
یلدا دهقانی هستم. 28 ساله. متأهل هستم و ایران میکاپ آرتیست و گیریمور بودم. با شروع اعتراضات زن، زندگی، آزادی، من هم مثل بسیاری از هم‌میهنانم با ایمان به اینکه آزادی حق ماست، سکوتم را شکستم. به خیابان رفتم و بهایش را با از دست دادن زندگی خودم و خانواده‌ام و 7 ماه شکنجه و تجاوز و اعدام مصنوعی دادم. بارها مرگ را بوسیدم، ولی زنده موندم تا شهادت بدم. ما از همیشه به حقیقتی که برایش جنگیدیم نزدیکتر هستیم. زن، زندگی، آزادی.
سلام و درود. من سمیرا مادر هستی حسین پناهی هستم. قبل هر چیز در داورترین کار همین است که من به جای هستی حرف میزنم. هستی در زمان قیام ژینا در سال 401 دانش آموز 14 ساله در مقطع دوم راهنمایی بود و همزمان با تحصیل به نویسندگی در زمینه داستان‌های کوتاه فعالیت میکرد. هستی در مدرسه توسط نیروهای اطلاعات شهرستان دهقلان از توابع استان کردستان مورد بازجویی قرار گرفت و تا جایی که برای دستگیری او به تعقیب سرویس مدرسه اقدام کردند و در اثر این اقدام وحشیانه هستی به مدت 6 ماه کما بود. هنوز هم با گذشت 3 سال از این اتفاق متاسفانه هنوز سمت راست بدنش فلج است و از لحاظ ذهنی هم با مشکلات جدی روبروست. جمهوری اسلامی طی این 46 سال جنایت زیادی علیه کودکان و مردم ایران مرتکب شده که هستی و افراد زیادی نمونه بارز و شاهدی زنده بر جنایت جمهوری اسلامی هستند.
Their courage brings us back to the question before us: how will free nations respond? The bravery of these survivors mirrors the unyielding spirit of Iranian civil society. Even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, women continue to reject the compulsory hijab, to sing, to dance, to reclaim the public square. With each act of defiance, they have reshaped society, not because the regime has reformed, but because Iranian women are unstoppable. Today, Iranians, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, or ideology, are insisting on a future where no one's dignity is conditional. Iceland's story teaches us 3 lessons that resonate powerfully for Iran. The first is that shared purpose turns many voices into one powerful community. The 1975 strike worked because it was collective. In Iran, the movement's power is also collective. Students, workers, teachers, truck drivers, minorities, artists, mothers of the slain. Our task is to keep that community visible and connected, even as the regime tries to divide its opposition and international lawmakers in order to survive. The second, in free societies, law is a lever for change, not a tool of oppression. In Iceland, collective action led to laws that locked in women's gains. In Iran, by contrast, laws silence, punish, and prevent change. The Iranian people understand that the regime itself is the obstacle to justice, and that establishing a representative, accountable system in its place is the only way to end impunity. Just as Iceland transformed activism into lasting legal change, Iranians can turn today's fight into tomorrow's constitutional protections. Third, symbols only matter if they mobilize. Vigdis in 1980 wasn't symbolism, she was governance. Likewise, woman, life, freedom isn't a hashtag. It is a governance demand for women's rights, for dignity, for democracy. So where do we go from here? I'd like to offer 5 concrete avenues for Icelandic leadership. The first, lock in accountability architecture. Continue to co-sponsor and rally votes each Human Rights Council session to sustain the FFMI and the Special Rapporteur in Iran until systemic change is verifiable. Ensure that the resolutions on Iran include language addressing transnational repression, because that repression doesn't only exist at home. They follow dissidents abroad and they target them. Encourage more states to second national investigators to the FFMI to accelerate evidence preservation for future prosecutions. Secondly, advance the law on gender apartheid. In the UN Sixth Committee negotiations on the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, champion explicit recognition of gender-based apartheid, building on Iceland's own public interventions, calling for that discussion. Convene a Reykjavík legal roundtable bringing Global South jurists, Afghan and Iranian women's rights defenders, and treaty negotiators to land workable text. Thirdly, target the machinery of repression. Use Iceland's sanctions and financial integrity tools, coordinated with the EU and like-minded states, to designate individuals and entities credibly implicated in severe abuses. The architects of the compulsory veiling law, those cracking down on peaceful protests, state broadcasters airing forced confessions, and those directing execution surges. Iceland can also use its free press to amplify Iranian dissidents' voices while exposing and countering regime propaganda. Fourth, resource civil society resilience. Expand emergency visas and temporary relocation fellowships for Iranian human rights defenders, journalists, lawyers, and artists. Help fund independent unions, human rights defenders, scholarships for at-risk students, Persian language helplines, legal aid, and digital safety training. Partner Icelandic universities, media labs, and women-led startups with Iranian diaspora initiatives to sustain knowledge networks. Fifth, keep the world's eyes open. Use Iceland's moral megaphone, its presidency, its parliament, cities, and cultural institutions to platform Iranian voices at every major gathering. Instead of hosting representatives of the repressive regime, invite courageous Iranians to your state functions, amplifying the voices of those fighting for the very freedoms you uphold. Encourage sustained media coverage of the execution crisis and the targeting of women under the hijab law. This grim arithmetic must never be normalized. Solidarity is not seasonal. It's not the week of an anniversary. It's the work between anniversaries. It sounds like ambassadors counting votes in Geneva at 3 a.m. It looks like a small island state standing up in rooms where it would be easier to sit down. It feels like the steady hand extended to those still crossing their storm. Iceland once taught the world that when women sit out, everything stops. Iranian women are teaching the world that when women stand up, everything moves. They have marched unveiled, under batons and cameras. They have sung in court corridors. They have turned grief into action. Our task, our privilege, is to match their courage with consistency. So let us commit to name the system, gender apartheid, so we can outlaw it, to count every life taken, over 1,100 so far in 2025. So we can halt the machinery that takes the next, to raise the political cost of repression and stop the Islamic Republic in its tracks, and to defend the truth finders, the fact-finding mission, and the special rapporteur. So history cannot be revised by the perpetrators. Movements are maps. They tell us not only where people are, but where they're going. The map from Reykjavík to Tehran is clearer than it seems, from Women's Day off to woman life freedom. From the world's first elected woman president to the day Iran holds its first truly free election, where every woman can compete for the nation's highest offices. The poet Farrokh Saad once wrote, "I shall plant my hands in the garden. I shall grow. I know, I know, I know." Iranian women have planted their hands in the rocky soil of history. Our job is to make sure that garden survives the storm, grows roots strong enough to shape its destiny, and ultimately sees the sun. Just as Iceland's legacy honors the Valkyries and Freya as symbols of strength and guardianship, Iran's future can rise on the wings of women inspired by the ancient goddess Anahita and the courage of generations. Our societies, though distant, abound by this deep reverence for women as creators and protectors of life and freedom. Kona, liv, frelsi. Zan, zendegi, azadi. Woman, life, freedom. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for this powerful, strong speech. And thank you also for sharing those testimonies that you showed up on the screen from these women that have endured horrific incidents and brutal violations for themselves and their loved ones. My name is Anna Ludvigsdóttir. I'm the director of Amnesty International here in Iceland, and I've been so honored to spend some time with you the last couple of days, and we have managed to have some talks. Now we will have around 15 minutes more that we can talk together, and then I will open the floor here so the audience can make questions to Nazanin. And yes, so I will just start with some thoughts. Of course, during your speech, you went over a broad spectrum of the power of the Iranian women, but as well how strong the regime is and how the violations are so brutal. You also mentioned that the grandmothers of the women today, they had more freedom and more rights than the young women that are growing up there today. Can you maybe paint a picture of the difference before 1979 and after 1979? What is the difference that is maybe obvious to people that are living there, but also maybe something more hidden, something more kept away from the public eye at least?
Sure. First of all, excuse the tears. This sometimes happens because 18 years of activism, and this feels like such a watershed moment that we have to seize. And I'm so inspired, to be honest, being in Iceland with you all and your strong female leadership, women's leadership. It's just so meaningful to me. But to answer your question, what many people don't realize is that before 1979, there were definitely problems in Iran. But as far as women's rights went, there was this thing called the White Revolution, pre-1979, where there were hard-gained rights that women had made progress in, and especially in family law. in divorce and child custody and various aspects of their life that made their lives much easier. And veiled and unveiled women coexisted and peacefully. And when I see images of my parents' wedding, for example, in Tehran, which took place, I think, in just before, maybe a couple of years before the revolution happened, you wouldn't believe it. You would think, well, this is just like, any free society that you can think of. So when we talk about compulsory hijab, it really is just an outward symbol of the overall repression that women have faced over the past 46 years, where practically overnight, those hard-earned gains were stripped away. And as I said in my speech, the legal age of marriage for women was reduced from 18 to 9, and that can still happen with the approval of a judge and a father's approval. And so that's from child marriage to the loss of all those family laws and protections, and the fact that we used to have a thriving national ballet. We had female pop singers. This is something that is sort of unfathomable now. It's unbelievable for people, but it is a very stark contrast. And because these young women are seeing images of their grandmothers doing all those things and going to the beach with their boyfriend, it's something that they connect to, and they think that they can regain those rights.
Mm-hmm. So they see they have role models in front of them in the people in their families, but as well probably, as you say, in photos and stories that their grandmothers tell them. What do you think? You mentioned also gender apartheid. What significance does it have that it has been recognized, the system has been recognized as a gender apartheid? Amnesty International now uses that word. We hear that human rights organizations are using that word for the system. What difference does that make for women in Iran?
Yes, I want to be careful because we have recognized it as Amnesty and various institutions and lawmakers. I'm so grateful that the lawmaking, several years ago, lawmakers would hesitate to say the words gender apartheid. Even at Amnesty, we struggled to use, because we thought, well, this isn't really a legal, and it still is not, under the international law, a legal term. But we're normalizing it because you have to name it to dismantle it. It's as simple as that. If you don't name it, if you don't have it codified, how can you dismantle it? So I applaud every woman leader, every government that is pushing that forward, because I think it's one of those things that, as it did in the racial context for South Africa, it will absolutely change things for the women of Afghanistan and Iran.
Now, you're also a world-famous actress, if I can come a little bit into a personal part of your life. You have used the platform that you have to raise your voice, and you have been an activist for a long time. Has either role in your life, either being an actress, interfered with you being an activist, or your activism, has it ever interfered with your role as an actress?
Well, I'm not naive to the fact that I get to do this activism on the level that I do it because of my acting platform. I mean, I would like to think that this is something I could do even if I wasn't an actor, but the truth is that they go hand in hand. I always say that as an actor, I sort of get to portray the human condition. And as an activist, I hopefully get to contribute to changing the human condition. But both of them are rooted in empathy. Now, where it gets tricky is, for example, when Women Life Freedom happened and I was promoting a TV series, I knew in that moment that I had to prioritize my activism. This has become sort of a full-time job for me. It, of course, does from that, because I knew that that moment called for 100% of my attention, all of our attention, in this moment that was sort of a very unique moment in history that we had to seize on. And so in that sense, when you're outspoken, there's always a chance that someone may not agree with you. To be honest, if there weren't people who disagreed, we wouldn't have to be doing this work.
For sure.
So, of course, activism is all about pushing up against boundaries and walls. And I think that can always create pushback that can affect your career and your livelihood. But I think it's a moral imperative, and I can't do it any other way.
And you have been championing, for Amnesty International since 2008. Earlier this year, you were chosen as the ambassador of conscience for Amnesty in UK. How important is it? These human rights organizations, not only Amnesty International, is plentiful of them. How important is it that these organizations are often hand in hand, fighting for the same cause and putting the eyes of the world on the same issues? How does that help the fight of the Iranian women?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be partnered with Amnesty US for a long time, and then Amnesty UK, I think it's been for a few years now, and I'm on the board of a wonderful organization, US-based organization called the Abdurrahman Burman Center for Human Rights in Iran, which is only Iran-focused. And what it does is it essentially organizes the work that I'm able to do. It gives you a sense of community, and it gives you, a partnership that essentially helps streamline your activism. Mm-hmm. I remember when I started, I would, by myself and maybe two of my friends, go outside of media networks and hold pickets and signs and then just sort of try to get the word out. But when you have organizations you can partner with, it really gives you sort of an avenue and a path to follow. And you have like-minded people, who can work alongside you, because I think this work, you cannot do it alone. It takes community, as you know, as the head of Amnesty here in Iceland.
Power numbers.
Exactly.
You mentioned also that now we can see photos from Tehran of women dressed.
I showed you the video.
Yes, you showed me a video a couple of days ago, and it was quite impressive. It's almost like, wow, this is definitely not the image that I would have of women in Iran at the moment. But obviously there are some changes coming. Something seems to be there, like women are pushing back. How is the society? I'm also interested, how are the men in society also embracing this pushback?
It's interesting. I thought about playing that video for you, but my fear is always when people see that video, they say, oh, well what's the problem? Well, there is a problem, but it's just that these women are fearless, and they're dressing however they want anyway. Of course, the regime is still taking people and making examples of them. They know they're all at risk, but it's not the regime that's reformed. It's them who are unstoppable, as I said in my speech. And I think that pushing the boundary until it's peaceful civil disobedience. It's essentially, that's what it is. And it's changed the lives of people across the world, this peaceful civil resistance and disobedience. And that's exactly what they're doing. The difference today is that Iranian men are standing shoulder to shoulder with their daughters, their wives, their sisters, their mothers. The opposite of what happened in 1979, where women were thrown under the bus and they were forced to do, there was an uprising, 100,000 women strong, at least tens of thousands of Iranian women took to the capital, the streets of the capital, protesting against the newly forming compulsory hijab law. And they were met with acid in their faces, batons to the necks, and imprisonment and threats. And who was doing that? The people in charge. And who was telling them to submit? The men around them. And that has changed. And so what I want to make clear is that the people right now, the majority of the people being executed are men. Because these are also men who are calling for democracy and standing for the women. And it's not just about women's rights anymore. It's become about democracy, because they understand that without half the population of a country being represented and having their freedoms, democracy can't exist. But also ethnic and religious minorities have no rights. And LGBTQ plus community doesn't have rights. And the list goes on and on. But it all comes from a system that that favors political survival over public welfare. And so every step that they take is to preserve themselves as a regime and not to protect and help the people.
And you mentioned also the death penalty. Over 1,000 people have been killed so far in 2025, which is the highest number of execution in Iran for at least 15 years that Amnesty has recorded. 30 years, you mentioned. Amnesty, of course, called for the abolition of the death penalty in every instance all around the world, and we do so as well for Iran. Do you think there is any hope that Iran will stop this cruel and degrading punishment?
So in free societies, the system ensures that the justice prevails. Essentially, we have systems that allow us to fight against injustice. I think it was Bill Clinton who said there's nothing wrong with America that can't be made right with what's right with can't be fixed with what's right with America. The same is true for any free society. We have the elements in place to fix things. The opposite is true with a country like Iran under the Islamic Republic. And the reason I say that is because the very pillars of the system ensure its wrongs cannot be made right. So unfortunately, I don't see hope until this regime is still there. But I have the hope that I have is that the people inside Iran will self-determine and will find what is right for them. But as we've seen in movements across the world, no one can do it alone. And that does not mean, interfering. That does not mean, this is something that the Iranian people will do by themselves. But they need your support. They need international support. And that looks like the fact-finding mission at the UN. That looks like solidarity with brave Iranian dissidents and not platforming regime officials. And internet, I think, is something that I didn't mention in my speech, but every time there's an uprising, they shut down the internet. And I'm hoping that the free societies across the world can find a way to allow Iranians to not only organize with each other, but communicate with the outside world during those uprisings.
Absolutely. Obviously, they don't want the information to get out of the country or inside. And while the death penalty is, or they use executions like that, every single person is under a threat. The whole community is not just, those who commit crimes. It's everybody is under, basically. So I guess it creates an atmosphere of terror, actually, within people. Everybody has to fear for their lives. Now, recently, Donald Trump is deporting hundreds of Iranians back to Iran as part of his immigration policy. What do you think about this? What is going to happen to those people when they go back to Iran?
I mean, when you look at the reason the most Iranians leave Iran, that they're not usually economic migrants. They're usually at-risk groups, ethnic and religious minority groups, LGBTQ+, women, dissidents, journalists. I mean, the list goes on and on of people who are persecuted. But my fear is that the people who are being deported will face extreme consequences when they go back. One case that I just became aware of is a filmmaker, an Iranian female filmmaker named Höfði Sobhani, who made a short film called That Night about a woman, her friend, Neda, who was arrested during the 2022 Women Life Freedom Uprising and sent to Evin prison and interrogated and humiliated. And that was the time when Evin prison, there was a fire in Evin prison that broke out. And this short film is so powerful because it basically tells the story of the resilience and courage of the Iranian people, that we have to maintain hope. And what do you think will happen to this young female filmmaker when she goes back, when she's sent back to Iran by force? someone who's bravely been amplifying the voices of the Iranian people. That's just one case that I'm aware of. But I'm sure there are many more, and I just encourage this administration to please understand that if on the one hand you're saying you support the Iranian people, but on the other hand you're not supporting dissidents, that is sending a very mixed message to the Iranian people.
Yeah. I think our time is up here. I want to open the floor for the audience to raise their questions. She will have the microphone. Thank you so much for our talk. Is anybody here that would like to? Yeah, is first one there, then a second one there.
Thank you very much, Boniadi. Very humble and emotional speech you had.
Thank you.
My first knowledge to the Iranian family was in Windsor, England, 1884. And that was a great evening, great food. My question is to you. Maria Corina from Venezuela was announced as a president. Her basic idea is to have a peaceful transition from dictatorship into democracy.
Yes.
I wonder if this move now, today, together with what you are talking about, how her fight can help you and your people to change. We are seeing this elsewhere. I see the respectful Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs of Palestine here. This is the same. The movement here in Iceland got this rights with a peaceful process.
That's right.
How optimistic are you regarding to your country?
I'm very optimistic. Thank you for your question. I'm very optimistic, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm seeing more and more women lead. The reason I'm so inspired to be here in Iceland is because of women's leadership and the example that you set. You know, when you look at the statistic that 95%, this is a UN statistic, that 95% of homicides, murders, are committed by men. It begs the question, of course, violent sexual assault and rape, of course, over 90%. It begs the question that why are more women not in positions of leadership? Because I truly believe that if we are to bring peace to the world and encourage peaceful civil disobedience and that transition and peaceful, then there needs to be, at the very least, a partnership between men and women, and that women need to be at the table. So it's inspiring to me to see women platformed and celebrated at the Nobel. I was there a couple of years ago when Narges Mohammadi won, and it's really inspiring, and it's a really important time to see so many women leaders being recognized and celebrated for choosing peace as the vehicle of change. And I think one thing that I want to stress is when we're seeing a backsliding of democracy across the world, and that's because autocracies are so united. Autocracies have really found a way to whether it's through propaganda or through unifying in their sort of mission, no matter their differences, they'll find a way to sort of attack democracy. Democracies have not been as united in recent years, and so there's a real backsliding in free societies of democracy. And until that changes, and until there's a unified and consistent way to address these threats by autocracies and by dictatorships, we're going to lose this battle. And I think one of the key elements is to put women at the table in free societies, to speak to their counterparts, Palestinian counterparts and the Venezuelan counterparts, and to have this, I think, network of women who can come up with the solutions. In a way, I'm sorry to say to the gentleman in the room, that history has proven that hasn't happened so far. So I think it's a very important and exciting time, and I actually welcome that there are male decision makers, men who are making this decision to open up the space and bring in women as they should.
Thank you. One question here, and then there are two down here.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for your wonderful speech. And as an Iranologist myself, and being from your neighboring country, from Armenia, it was really exciting for me to hear your perspective on this issue. And you also described that pre-revolution period as better for women. However, there are many critics arguing that Shah's reforms were just top down and they lack societal legitimacy, which also kind of triggered backlash and resulted in the Islamic Revolution. So my question is, do you think the current challenges reflect a reaction to those earlier challenges, or they were just like out of nowhere and that triggered all of this? Thank you so much.
It's an excellent and insightful question, and I'll tell you why. Because I think unless Iranians, there's a chicken and egg situation in here. Did a problem exist before 1979? And I'm not talking about only leadership. Within society, did we not, there's something that has been long existing within us that we need to fix. The idea that we can overcome this regime, for example, as individuals, to me is a pipe dream. We have to find unity in the opposition. And I think that is where the chicken and egg situation comes in, is unity didn't really exist before 79. We're very factionalized, we have many, many factions. And until that is resolved, until we find a way to make democracy our goal and set aside our differences, then that hope is not going to be kept alive. And unfortunately, that didn't happen before 79, and it's still not happening. I'm hoping, what's interesting is the youth in Iran, the people who are putting their lives on the line, they're all united across ideological divides. What is troubling to me is it's the people who are in the comfort of their homes across the world who don't seem to get their act together, and it really is the diaspora. So my call to Iranians everywhere is, this is a pivotal moment for the country. Are you going to really talk about division in this moment? And no, I'm left, I'm right, I'm a Republican, I'm a monarchist, I'm an extreme monarchist, I'm a constitutional monarchist, I want this person, I want that person, I won't talk to this person because they, this is a huge problem. Yes, it exists across the world, but it's very intensified in the Iranian context. So my hope is that we really start to reflect on issues that existed before 1979, what we didn't manage to fix. I think one thing that did exist in 79 with someone like Bakhtiar, who was the prime minister, is there was room for reform. And I think the problem now is there's no room for reform. So there are lessons that we can take from 79, pre-79, the revolution to date. But unless we learn lessons from history, it's going to repeat itself.
I think there was a question over here. Did I see a hand? No? Magne, then yes. Okay. We'll take two questions at the same time now. And so.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was very inspiring and also very educational. Obviously all of us brought in your work for the gender balance promotion. But my interest is a little bit in the role of religion when it comes to gender equality, because one of the issues with the level of gender equality not only in Iceland but in Northern Europe is partly the religion. Like Martin Luther was reforming the Catholic religion, Protestant religion came out of it, and he was saying there shouldn't be any intermediate between man and God. And women said, well, we are also men. So they started to advocate to become priests. And in Iceland, for example, the first by law, it was very contested that you could become a priest in 1914, then 1974 was the first women. It was when feminism was, they became feminist theology. And then the first bishop was not until 2012. So if you are not good enough for God, are you good enough to be a politician, prime minister, or president? Because there is this kind of association. And then religion of Islam, and then you see predominantly Catholic, Orthodox Islamic countries, the level of gender equality slower. And of course, religion of Islam is one thing, and political Islam is another one. And political Islam appeared to be kind of the discovery of man to gain power and use it in a very instrumental way to suppress women. And I feel that the religion of Islam is not the problem, is political Islam that is owned by men and used by men to keep them in power and oppress others. And then you were talking about the women pushing back. There's this organization called Musawa.
Maybe bring up the question so more people can.
In 2007. And they are really doing this. They're coming, they're academics, they're theologians, they're women, they're activists, they're feminists, and they're trying to come up with alternative interpretation of their own religion to reconcile between gender equality, women's rights, and their belief in God. So, what is the role of religion in the whole thing in political Islam?
I think in a nutshell.
We're going to take
Yes,
two
sure.
questions just to
Okay,
try to
if
use
I
the
can
time
remember.
better. Yeah, I wrote here. Role of
Thank you so
religion.
much.
I'm actually from Iran.
Hi,
So
Salam.
nice to see you. I wanted to ask one question that, what we've seen that women life freedom got a lot of attention worldwide. And then, of course, the attention went to pro-Palestine movement suddenly because it was such a disaster that was happening.
Yes.
But if you're wrong, I'm not trying to say that that's less important or more important. I am actually a pro-Palestine activist and an environmentalist that I've been leading campaigns actually for both. What I'm trying to say, I do that because I see a very bold connection between all of these movements. But what is happening in practice, as you said, we have to be united. But what happens is that when a disaster happens in climate or when something happens in a war, it divides the movement. What I'm trying to do to say that these are all connected, and I'm advocating more and more for that. But I just want to hear from you, how do you see in practice, how is it possible to amplify through other movements that's happening?
Yeah. Thank you for that important question. To get to the first one, I think what I'm hearing is politicized anything, any religion, politicized. We've seen it politicized in other religions too, has been detrimental to the world. And we still see elements of politicized religion in other, not in Iceland, but we see it across the world where religion is politicized. And I oppose that. The reason why Iranian people are risking everything is to separate the state from. They don't want a theocracy. They want a secular democracy. So I 100% agree that any time you have religion mixed with politics, it will be a problem, whatever that religion is. And yes, the issue of fundamentalism in Islam is a huge problem. The fundamentalism in any religion is a huge problem. And my hope is that we understand that faith is really a personal thing, that societies benefit when it is not something that is part of a system. And I think anytime we try to impose that on a society, that there will never be a deep understanding of the reason why Iranians want the highest rate of Christian converts in the world, there are 1 million Christians, is Iran. The fault lies with the regime. They have ruined Islam for Iranians. They believe that this is the problem. This is the religion is the problem. So they're doing a disservice. They don't know that they're doing it. They're not helping the cause of Islam in the world. One thing that I say to people is, I call it the Islamic Republic, because that's what they call themselves. And when people push back at that, I say, no, you have to understand, this is the name they've given themselves. I will continue to use that word until they stop calling themselves that, because I don't think they should be calling themselves that. So I think we have to allow society, as they're doing in Iran, to demand that separation. the ones who took into the streets of Tehran, of the major cities in Iran in 1979, to bring in this theocracy, which, by the way, was a minority of the overall population, but they were very vocal, wanted this. And now, unfortunately, they have to be the ones who say, we don't want this, and push back at it. It's not something we can say, like, this is the problem, they suffered the consequences for 46 years. And so I would argue that Iranians are among the most protective of democracy, or the fight for democracy in the world. They value freedom more than most, because it was taken away from them in many contexts, not in the political context, because there wasn't political freedom necessarily in Iran pre-79, but social freedoms and women's rights were very much part of society. So that's to answer your question. In essence, I think we need to have secularism everywhere. What the second question was, please remind me. You said, how do I connect? People often ask me, especially because I work with Amnesty. Amnesty covers a broad array of issues. I have chosen, for example, my path is to focus on Iran. And the reason for that is I am not well-versed. I don't know the nuances of Venezuela, of Russia, of Gaza. I don't know the nuances. I don't want to misspeak. I can say I see the pain and the suffering of the Palestinian people. I want that to stop. But for me to get into more, deeper conversations as an actress who is focused on this Iran issue, and I know a lot about the Iran issue, I don't know how to articulate the issues. You know what I mean? So I think that when you are well-versed as you are on that issue, you should absolutely have the right to speak on multiple issues. And they are connected. Of course human rights are connected. How can they not be? And if anybody pushes back at, why is this, nothing is more important than the other. I think the people who are shouting from the rooftops in any of these countries, saying, what about us, is because the world has looked away for too long. And they need you to say it. But I always say to activists, please do your homework. Don't just go and say, I read this and I'm just going to share it on social media, because that's never going to do anyone any good. But follow the accounts that you should be following, the voices that matter on these subjects, and get well versed. And then if anyone tells you that this is, one cause is more important than the other, or this is the cause that is the most important right now, as you articulated it perfectly, these are connected. And I don't want to see the people of Gaza suffering. I don't want to see the people of Iran suffering. This is not a competition. This is about basic fundamental human rights. And I think that the time that we live in right now that's so painful is the moment you give humanity to a hostage taken in Israel, and you also say, I want freedom for the people of Palestine. That becomes a conflict. That shouldn't be a conflict, right? Because basic human rights are basic human rights, And I think it's the sign of a polarized world that we live in, that when we talk about the fundamental rights of human beings, it immediately becomes politicized.
No, apparently we don't have time for more questions. I think we could sit here all day. Nazanin, thank you so much, and it has been great to spend time with you. I hope you all take something from this moment that we had here together. Thank you so much.